People of Reddit who knew celebrities before they were famous, how different do they act now? I went to school with Rupert Grint, Ron Weasley from Harry Potter. I was into acting too, so we had done a few school plays together. He was really nice, very chill, a good laugh. I haven't seen him since school days, but he kept coming to classes whenever he wasn't filming, was always happy to chat about the movies. Sometimes he'd need a little break from so many people wanting to talk, and would come and hang out in the library, and honestly, you'd never know he was in the biggest film series at the time. Honestly, I think a lot of these answers boil down to if they want fame or not. Rupert loved what he was doing, but didn't care about being famous and having people kiss his ass. Just a nice normal kid. He used to live in a town not too far from me. Everyone seemed to think he was a recluse and a bit of a moody prick, but I think, like you said, it can be tiring having people come up to you all the time, and he probably reasonably wanted some quiet for himself. A bit of the casting was done not far from where I grew up, the Weasley twins and Draco. My sister's claim to fame was that she once sat at a table in school that Tom Felton, Draco, had scratched his name into. That's exactly what so many celebrities become. I would if I couldn't go to the shops without being gawked at or worse, pestered. Must be exhausting. That's why so many go to live in LA, is the most normal place for them. I have a picture of Rupert and my father from a bar in Sweden. He was here for a movie and went out to drink at this bar, and my father happened to play guitar and sing on their stage for the night. He invited Rupert to the stage and the rest is history. A friend of mine is buddies with Paul Rudd. Says he's exactly the same and a great human. When I went on a holiday to LA, This Is 40 was about to premiere. I was maybe 18 at the time. My mother and I got into our hotel's elevator, and there stood Megan Fox and Paul Rudd. My mother, full Karen, grumbled about how silly it was that they blocked off roads in this town for a premiere of a shit movie. She had zero clue who they were. I knew. We three gave each other eye smiles as my mother grumbled about the film and the road etc. for a few minutes before telling them to have a nice day. My mother-in-law was at a very fancy dinner party, and didn't realize she was sitting next to Orlando Bloom and Katy Perry. She turned to them and asked, "So what do you do?" She's very chatty, and clueless about celebs and genuinely had no idea who they were. We all love retelling that story at family dinners. Friends and I went to a basketball court a few years back shortly after a rainstorm. Half the court was wet and half was dry. Saw a man and his son playing on the dry side, so we took the wet side. No need to force a father and son out. After a few minutes, the father walks over and offers to switch, says he and his son are just shooting around, no need to keep a game from the dry side. At first we say it's all good, enjoy, but he insists, graciously of course. We get to the other side and realize, the father was Paul Rudd. First class, humility in action. I knew Tom Holland at the time he did the Tsunami movie. We were not really friends, but he was so funny and friendly. My dad was good friends with Will Smith before the Fresh Prince days. Will actually showed him the pilot of the movie before it aired. Fast forward many years to After Earth and Will invited us on the set. His first words when he saw my dad 10 years later was, "The Philly crew is back." Both Will and Jaden are the sweetest people you will ever meet. Edit, my dad also did all of the work on Will Smith's and Jazzy Jeff's cars back in the day. Had a little too much fun in Will's Jeep and flipped it on its roof. My client had dinner with Will Smith at a restaurant in Charleston, South Carolina, and said he was a riot. Said they were laughing loudly throughout dinner. An older woman and her guest walked over when she was leaving and said she did not know whether to be pissed off or grab a chair and join them. Then Will turned around and she was pleasantly surprised to know him. After dinner Will went out and talked a rickshaw guy into letting him on the bike, and he took tourists for a ride. He seems like an awesome person. Bruno Mars's mom was a bartender at a local karaoke dive bar that I was a regular at. He wasn't famous yet at that time. Anyway, she was selling tickets for an upcoming concert he was having, and she asked our table if we wanted to buy some. My friend declined, and she exclaimed, "Why not? He's my son." I ended up getting a couple of tickets despite not knowing any of Bruno Mars's songs. It turned out to be one of the best concerts I've ever been to. The guy knows how to put on a good live show. The tickets were only $40 each, I think. His opening act was a local group of large Polynesian men singing Motown who went by the name Nesian 9. They were pretty good too. The next time he was in town for a concert, he had blown up and the tickets were going for $400. I would have loved to see him again, but not at that price. His mom was really nice, down to earth, and a pretty good singer herself. R.I.P. Bernie. At least she lived long enough to see her son's success. Went to middle school with Megan Fox for a bit. She rode my bus and she mostly kept to herself. Most of the guys would fight over who was going to sit next to her, but she was very shy and didn't really have much to say. My mom used to ride the bus to work in downtown Cleveland with Steve Harvey's first wife. Apparently she supported him while he was trying to get his career started. And then basically as soon as he got successful he divorced her for a younger woman. My mom always hated him because she felt that he treated his first wife like shit. She always yells "bastard" at the TV when he pops up. My grandpa, R.I.P., owned a grocery store in Miami in the late 70s. Wesley Snipes and his friends once stole some candy from his store, and when he caught them he let them have it. Since then Wesley and his friends were regulars. Once, Wesley left his bike in front of the store and it got stolen. Was a pretty bad area. My grandpa gave him his old bike that he kept in the back of the store. My uncle took over in 2001 when my grandpa died. In 2007 he came back to the store while my uncle and cousin were there, to ask about my grandpa. My uncle said they talked for a little over an hour about how my grandpa treated him like a son. When he found out my grandpa passed away, he felt guilty he didn't visit sooner. He embraced my uncle and cousin and left. My uncle told him they plan on having the building repainted, while they talked. About a week later a crew of painters arrived and told my uncle they were already paid to have the building repainted. Such a genuine dude. Jack Black is the same person he was as a teenager, funny, kind, caring, and spreading that joy of music. Fun fact, Jack Black used to put wires up his sleeves when he was a kid in the hopes that other kids would notice them poking out and think he was bionic. I put wires up my sleeve and I wanted the wires just to peek out a little bit so that if any kids noticed my wires I would say, "It's nothing, it's nothing." They would think I was bionic, because my logic was that I was trying to hide my bionics from them. What a guy. I went to Northwestern University with David Schwimmer. He lived with my best friend in a house after graduating. He's an outstanding actor with a huge range, only actor ever to make me tear up in the middle of a play. Nice guy. My high school theater director knew David Schwimmer, so we were able to acquire the rights to perform his play Trust at our school. He even came to one of the performances. I wasn't in the play, but I did set construction. Unfortunately, I wasn't at the performance he came to. Cool, a topic I can contribute to. Went to high school with John Legend. He was a year older than me. He was clearly very talented, lead role in most school plays, musical acts at talent shows etc., but he was basically just a really nice, humble guy. I wasn't friends with him, but I was an athlete who hung out with the theater crowd. I helped on set construction and sound for shows. He was a basketball fan and came to most of our school's games. His cousin was also on the team and a year younger than me. Was friends with Natalie Portman in first grade. Had a faux fur coat. Her mom would pack her lunch in lots of little containers with instructions on how to assemble them. That's all I remember. Was a freshman when Chris Pratt was a senior. We didn't interact much, but he was in a lot of the assemblies and I did tech theater for a play he was in. He was a goofball. Lots of charisma, laid back, class clown. Same as now. My grandfather taught Jack Nicholson in high school math class. Said he was rebellious but wasn't too bad at math. A close family friend was best friends with Tom Cruise before he got famous. I didn't believe her and she showed me pictures they have taken together, like a Vegas road trip, camping, etc. He was really awesome, but as soon as he got an ounce of fame it went to his head and he became very arrogant. I had a friend in high school whose cousin is Kendrick Lamar. He said Kendrick's pretty much still the same guy, acts the same around friends and family, just with millions of dollars now. My aunt was best friends with Moduana in high school, stayed friends until she got famous and she turned into a completely different person in the worst way possible. I can't remember before my aunt was famous. Alex Kingston played River Song in Doctor Who, but I remember going to her wedding and meeting Matt Smith, who played the Doctor in Doctor Who, and him fixing my flip-flop, the best moment of my life ever. I met Matt Smith too, but he was already famous. I was dating a guy who lived in the same fancy church renovated building as him. One night I was waiting outside for my date, he was late, and Matt Smith walked by. I smiled and said hello. A few weeks later he was on Top Gear and was asked about his experiences with creepy fans. He then proceeds to describe me, said I looked 11, I was 19, and that I was hiding in the bushes waiting for him outside his building. You filthy liar, Matt Smith. Also, I licked your mail as revenge. I had a teacher who taught Drake. Apparently he was a nice kid but then got really douchey when he started getting famous. A friend of mine was friends with Tom Hanks in high school and went to prom with him. He still writes to her personalized birthday cards on one of his typewriters. My mom knew Seal as far back as when he was still trying to be an architect, and she says he was always really nice. They didn't stay in touch, she moved away and they were never close, but she said he went out of his way to foster genuine connections to people before and after his music started to gain traction. He always had star quality. Everyone from the most important person in the room to a janitor walking through would be drawn to him, and he was kind enough to talk to everyone. She always mentions that he was just a really sincere, deeply felt person. He randomly views my Instagram stories. According to a story in the New York Times, he does this a lot. He said me looking at people's stories, answering people or sending them a quick message, it's always coming from a place of love. Yep, he watched one of my stories too. Was pretty delightful. Family friend of mine actually dated Kurt Cobain before M''S.Love. Apparently they broke up because he wouldn't get a job, then a little while later he got famous. Can't finish the question for obvious reasons. I remember that story, he wrote about a girl for her to stop being mad on his unemployment. Kurt Cobain wrote this for his girlfriend at the time, Tracy Miranda. They lived together for a while, and she took the photo that's on the album cover. Miranda didn't know the song was about her until she read about it years later in the book about Story of Nirvana. When I was really young I'd go the reptile park, originally owned by Bob Irwin and then passed on to his son Steve. Steve was always nice, would do all the lizard and croc shows, would hang out and chat afterwards. My dad would take me there occasionally and Steve would seem to remember us, treated everyone like an old buddy. This was before he became famous obviously, and the small reptile park became the Australia Zoo. In my final year of high school I got in the zoo for work experience and they let me stay on. Steve was rarely there, and when he was he'd avoid guests, because they would swarm him and he'd get nothing done, but when I did run into him he was always super nice and still acted like that old friend. Unfortunately he died later that year, so right up till the end he was just a lovely person. Fun story, first time I ran into Steve while working there he was holding 2 coconut halves up to his chest like a bra, then shyly put them behind his back when I walked into the staff area, as the others around him burst out laughing. It was some joke, I forget what it was, I just walked in at a very awkward moment. Are there any of you who know any celebrities? Leave a comment, and subscribe to this channel if you want to see more same videos.